Welcome back, everyone, to Mystic Personas. This will be your forecast for the week of April 16th, the back half Wednesday through Sunday. If you have not watched the previous part of the week, I highly recommend you do it so you can constantly look and integrate as the week continues to flow and change. It's been an interesting month so far, hasn't it? I hope that your last week was super aware. That was an amazing, amazing experience. And again, thank you so much for those of you who are members of the Mystic Personas channel. Thank you so much. We couldn't do this without you. We're so excited, and it's been really fun on the backside over there, the things we've been going through. If you're not a member, I highly encourage you to consider it. If not, like, subscribe, share, and nothing else, enjoy, and visit mysticpersonas.com where you can get your own living blueprint. The book is now in pre-order, so get ready for that. It's ready. This is the absolute first time the entire blueprint has been released. For levels 1 and levels 2. And of course, this is the exciting part. You can get the deck, and of course, there's new things coming. But we'll get into that later. But right now, let's get right into it for the core, the Whiz Mage, the Shadow Jester, and the Oracle Knight. Wow. We're going to come right out of it in the box here. Okay, so as you always know, we're moving from left to right. We're moving past to future. So you know your timeline sequencing. This is approximately Wednesday. This is approximately Sunday. So you can start to see as the week progresses, they also happen simultaneously. Remember, in dual path dynamics, both paths are happening simultaneously, and it is the integration of both paths, both conscious and subconscious, the seen and the unseen, the left and the right, the insights and the whispers, all coming together to bring the diamond that you are and all the angles and facets of the diamond of self, which is each persona reflected, and how that light, as you see through each of the cards, is reflected through you. So what's really fascinating here is we've got some going from this, I don't want to say dark space, but where the light is behind us, the moving more into the light behind us, and our face is becoming more illuminated, all the way to the Oracle Knight, where it is a complete illumination. So let's dive right into it. As you know, a Whiz Mage is one of the original core 4, right into level 1, and they are the analytical guide. They are the visionary strategist. They are the Whiz Mage channels wisdom through strategic foresight, and reflective thinking. What makes the Whiz Mage so unique is truly the blend of intellect and intuition, right? Or I and I. So when you hear it I and I sequencing in the Whiz Mage, what you're really saying is we're blending the unseen self and the seen self together to create the Whiz Mage. The Whiz, and is the analytical. The Mage obviously is a mage who is in tune with what's going on in nature and intuition themselves. And these intellect, the downside of the Whiz Mage is obviously we can get lost in intuition and intellect and that analytical integration of the two, and we can lose our emotional connection, not just with ourselves, but often with those around us. Right, so let's start off with realizing that, hey, we're taking our intuition, we're taking our intellect, we are seeking to integrate as the back half of the week is beginning and moving towards the end of the week. But let's not get lost in our emotional disconnection. And often we can do that with ourselves. How often have we laid awake at night and thought and analyzed and forgot that there's other people around us, and people are like, hey, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. What's the matter? That's the part of the Whiz Mage self. Remember, the Whiz Mage self is all about integration. That is the thematic or the theme of the Whiz Mage line is integration of the intellect and the intuition, which really leads to the Shadow Jester. Now, the Shadow Jester here, if you're new to the channel, this is probably the first time you're starting to see it as we go along here. But here's the funny thing about the Shadow Jester. You can see all of this happening reflected in the card. The Shadow Jester is really about witty disruption and thoughtful provocateur. Well, that sounds different than when you hear the satirist and other over in the Whispers side, but really the Shadow Jester is using humor to challenge, the conventional and thought process, and really invite change. Now, this is a blend because the Shadow Jester can use their influence through cynicism, right, to sincerely foster this trust, but cynicism can get it from the perspective of, hey, I've done the analytics here. This didn't work so well in the past, and we're really kind of headed down our own. We're going to beat our head against a wall. As an example, very lightly, of a Shadow Jester, if you'd like to see more, they're obviously on the back of the cards, which you can get on your own. And as a member, we dive into them deeper. But for now, know that your Shadow Jester is really about using our wit, our intellectual comedic wit, to disrupt patterns because we've analyzed it. We can intuitively intuit that ourselves or our someone else in our team, our significant other, kids, business, personal relationship, however you feel this applies relevant to you, is, hey, we can disrupt those thought patterns, but we're not disrupting to disrupt. No different than the trickster is trying to disrupt to distract. The shadow jester is disrupting to say, hey, wait a minute. What about we do this change? Because I've analyzed it from the Whiz Mage perspective. I feel this is the right path. And let's use some humor to continue to inspire that, which will lead as we go into the back and final half of the week to the Oracle Knight. Now, the Oracle Knight is an empowered protector. Look at this, surrounded by light and golden. It is represented here in the female form, but it is not specific to gender. It's male or female, doesn't matter, because again, we're both dual path dynamics. Both your masculine and your feminine side are happening simultaneously. It is just represented on this card, but look how she's got her sword there. She's solid. She's got this energy coming up and down. It's beautifully flowing here, and she's surrounded not just around the light behind her, but also it's reflecting on the front of her. So you can see we're coming from a little the light starting to reflect in the Whiz Mage as our Whiz Mage self looks into the intellect and intuition. We start disrupting ourselves with a little bit of humor. The light becomes more prolific. We can see the light on the shadow of the self saying, yep, here's the shadow using our witty and, well, insight, provocativeness, with comedy, but we're bringing it to the light so we can see it. And then we move into our Oracle Knight. And again, all three of these are driving each other. This is why it's called the core. And we're moving from left to right as the week goes longer. But the Oracle Knight really balances courage with wisdom to guide others. They need to align their strength and their trust to build lasting alliances. And again, there's the back of the card if you'd like to see how you can do that. And when you get your own set, you'll understand it even more as you follow along. Again, those of you who are here, thank you so much. Like, subscribe, comment below. Which of the three have you already seen as the reading has started in yourselves? If not all three, or maybe it's these two, or it's these two, or these, or whatever combination. Or maybe it doesn't apply at all. Maybe you're not even aware of this yet, and that's okay. This is about awareness. We are in an era of awareness. And awareness just means being aware. It's not a have to do something. It's not a I don't want to do, don't have to do something. It's about aware of our choices. It's about awareness of our integration. The awareness that it is the great recollection. And you've heard me say this here before on this channel. You hear me say it often. You definitely say it over on the member side a ton. We are moving out of the or era of humanity, OR, which we've been in for quite some time. And now moving into the and. So it's not I'm a Whiz Mage or an Oracle Knight. It's not a Shadow Jester or the Whiz Mage and Oracle Knight. It's the Whiz Mage and the Shadow Jester and the Oracle Knight all working in integration to drive ourselves, to look at our intuition and our intellect, to blend the two together, to use our wit and our way, our insights to drive ourselves to think a little differently, to analyze perspective, and to bring that beautiful cynicism of the shadow, but using it to drive more light as we bring our oracle to the self and really being protecting, not protectors and moving from this perspective and fight, but protecting ourselves to stay as our visionary leader of ourselves, which is really about listening to our intuition, which is why these two are so fantastically blended together, and how we blend our Whiz Mage and the Oracle Knight together so that they are integrated. And we're working towards this using all aspects of ourself to get to where we're going, which leads us now, as you know, to the shadow box. So let's go find out what's happening here in the back half of the week for April 16th in the shadows. This gives us an opportunity to become aware of where we may listen to certain thoughts that come in from the different personas, whether that's on the insights, the whispers, or the shadows, or the oracles, of how we might distract ourselves. And it's easy because our mind can do it all the time. That was a drop. And pull ourselves, does it not? So it's being aware of the integration. It's not getting angry with ourselves and having our personas have an internal war, right? How often do we have those internal board meetings in our head, right? Let's go. Well, the vampire definitely wanted to come out, so I guess that was designed in the bastion and the cloak. Woo! We've got some heavy shadows coming in this week. Well, the vampire is pretty straightforward, right? What is the vampire really about? The vampire really drains the energy and the resources from others. Now, this is an internal experience as well as an external experience. Remember, dual path dynamics, they're both happening simultaneously. Becoming aware of them is really our journey, and how we choose to make that awareness apply through other parts of our personas. But the vampire really is about thriving on dependency and control, right? They fear independence. And of course, they prefer to keep others tied to their influence, which is a really fancy way of saying, look, the Whiz Mage is when we integrate our intellect and our intuition, we're really blending the human experience and the spiritual experience simultaneously, which they are blended. And dual path dynamics demands that we acknowledge awareness that, yes, you may be having a human experience as a spiritual being, but you're not one or the other. And you're not only human, because that's not true. And you're not only the spiritual being having a human experience. You're having both simultaneously because you are multifaceted and dynamic. The vampire part of ourselves says, hey, I'm going to take that intuition and I'm going to be able to figure out through my analytical self, right? My intuition and my intelligence, my intellect, and how to drain that energy on others, from others, and pull it into myself. Or often we can do this to ourselves. We will drain ourselves with our over analytics. I know I'm guilty of that. Comment below if you've been raised high. I am one of those. I've drained myself over analyzing it and literally vampired myself right into this controlling mechanism of, the old proverbial, the paralysis by analysis, and the vampire part of ourself feeds on that. And you can see the red that is represented here, which is really in referencing, and you see heart, it is pulling the heart energy, it is pulling the life blood out of the intuitive self that is seeking to bring to the light. The vampire will pull that back down into the shadow realm, and we'll sometimes get lost in energy drain. And when we drain ourselves, then we'll go start looking for other energy sources to feed off of. That could be your significant other, your family, partners, friends, people you meet on the street, online. You tell me where it applies, comment below. And we see that. Now, mind you, remember, this isn't just an internal experience. This is also what's happening around us. So where are the vampires that are going to take your passion, your intuition, and they're going to pull it, for themselves to feed off of it and use your analytics and get you lost in it. Next thing you know, you feel this paralysis by analysis, which leads us over to the Bastion. Bastion is a powerful, powerful shadow. The Bastion really becomes, really about overly rigid and relying on control and resistance to protect themselves and their goals. Right? Now, they fear change. Again, we're hearing this fear theme come along again, right? We are fearful of how light we can become. We are fearful of our own intuition and intellect. We are fearful of disrupting our own pattern selves and becoming the beautiful part of ourselves that is integrated in the Oracle Night. And the Bastion is really the midway of that, where we start to get cynical, but we're going overly cynical and we drop down into the Bastion. And now we become controlling. We're pulling the energy from ourselves or others, using the vampire part of ourselves to suck the energy in. And I'm going to use energy. I'm going to control them as they're drained, or we're draining ourselves. And next thing you know, we're down in the shadows and we really aren't going anywhere. We're just sitting there. A little bit of a light in the background, but really just kind of sitting in the shadows going, well, it's never going to work. My sins I've done before. There's nothing new. Blah, blah, blah. And you can hear those thoughts. And again, if you like some more of them, they're always on the back of the cards and what to be careful for. And of course, how do you actually patternistically move ourselves in a deeper way from the Bastion? And I don't mean running away from, meaning not sitting in it, because the Bastion's there. There's a reason for the Bastion. And there are times where we need to have a shadow space of our cynicism. That's for us to choose. But be aware when we're doing it to ourselves or it's being done to us without our agreement, without our choosing, without our saying, I choose this and this is the path I choose to go on. If you choose, again, there's nothing wrong with it. It's your path. It's your awareness. It's your journey, right? You're creating the journey of a lifetime. And now that leads us to later part of the week, the cloak. Now look at the cloak. The cloak is just fascinating, right? Surrounded by light, but really can't see, the cloak at all. This persona can't really get a sense of what's happening because the cloak really hides in ambiguity, which is why you see all the general light sounds great, but it doesn't have anything specific and prefers to walk in the shadows and to avoid vulnerability. So we'll talk about these beautiful experiences and we'll talk about how this could be great, but it's these real vagaries. It doesn't have anything because they fear exposure and they rely on the invisibility to protect their influence and agenda. Well, what is our agenda if we look at it from the shadow realm, which is really to, feed off our own life source energy and pull ourselves down into these thoughts that say, well, I'm not going to do it. It's got to look this way. And we've done it before and that's failed and that's never going to work. And that's bogus and da, 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 da. When our real agenda is, I don't want to go back out there again because the deep part of me is fearful that what if I fail? What if I read it wrong? What if I lose my money? What if, I end up, not successful? Well, remember one thing, seekers, and always can kind of keep that in perspective. And that is dual path dynamics says, hey, we understand that life has an end that is what commonly called death, right? Which is the death archetype. So when we talk about death, death has always been, gleaned into the shadow realms. Death is a transitional archetype that moves us from this realm, the human realm, to the spiritual realm. Again, those are both happening simultaneously. But when we transition out of the chapter of our human realm into our spiritual realm, death is that transitionary archetype that moves us through. But when we talk about that, we know that that's happening. It's coming there. Where do we use our shadows to distract ourselves from the ultimate experience that we want called life? Where do we rationalize ourselves of the whiz mage in our logic and overanalyze, and the vampire's just sucking the life out of us with, well, this can't happen, and that needs to happen in order to this happen, and I don't know about this, and what about that? And I'm not saying lose your prudence or your due diligence. What I am saying is be mindful of getting caught up in it, being sucked into that, and the bastion says, well, it can't work, it'll never work, and we lose ourselves in the cynicism versus using that beautiful humor to disrupt and break open and bring in more of the oracle self and integrate that in, where the bastion says, how about we use the rigidity to stay on course, but not pull ourselves into non-growth, because then our cloak will show up. And the cloak is really about, again, staying in the shadows, being ambiguous and not really getting specifically asking for what we want, both internal and external. And how often have you, perhaps looked to the stars, looked to your higher power, and asked for something that didn't show up. And then, of course, we have this part of ourselves that gets angry or pulls back. And Bastion says, well, it's never going to work. And the cloak says, well, we're just going to stay in the shadows. We'll just talk in ambiguity. We'll be politically correct. We won't speak our truth. We won't do it from a perspective of just, hey, this is where I stand. I'm solid in who I am. I may not be perfect, but I'm aware of what's happening this week, and I'm aware of my cloak that wants to pull in, or I'm aware of the cloak around me that speaks in generality, but really has got their own agenda and is seeking to pull because of their fear, because there's the fear theme happening this week. Well, now let's find out what the oracles have for us this week of April the 16th and how this is going to help our full integration of our 9-card grid. If you want to know how to use the 9-card grid in every other aspect of your life, make sure you become a member. This is the opportunity, which is where we take you down dual path dynamics. And again, walk you through a deeper dive. And for those of you who are members, thank you so much. It's so much fun over there on the member side. You get advanced experiences, and there's many opportunities for everybody to be a member at whatever level you choose to. Again, you are the architect, so you get to choose your path anytime that you want and how you want to do it. And again, like, subscribe, and share. We really appreciate it. Let's go. All right, here we go. Oracle of Wisdom, the Ethereal, and the Arcane Sage. Wow. Wow. Now, if memory serves, the Ethereal showed up late in the last week, and is now coming back around. So that'll be interesting. Let's see how that ties in. But let's drop right into the first part of the week. We're going to run into the Oracle of Wisdom. And again, here we go. Look, we're looking in, the Whiz Mage is looking down into the self, using the blending, the integration. Remember, the Whiz Mage's theme is integration. And the Oracle of Wisdom is looking down to this internal, the light behind is shining. So we're looking into the shadow realm of self-conscious, getting really crystal clear on what we want, analyzing that information, making sure as we maybe need to drain off some of those things. We pull the energy away from the things that we don't need. Again, this could be internal, external, but really the Oracle of Wisdom is going to come inside and say, hey, look, this is about enlightening the Whiz Mage. Again, these two are, you can see it, it's right there on the card, you see it yourself. Enlightens the Whiz Mage to balance intellect with compassion. Key word, transforming knowledge into meaningful action, and by grounding the ideas in reality. They both lead, of course, through mind and heart. Again, you see both of them are looking down, intuition. Obviously, the Oracle is looking more towards the heart, but we see the light starting to emerge behind the Whiz Mage, where if we drop into our shadow self, the light gets a little more, obviously darker. And it is obviously red, the lifeblood, where the oracle part of ourselves is hey, we're going to help ourselves through the intuition and the integration of intellect, the blending of the two. And we're going to blend these two together, but we're going to do it with compassion. We're going to make sure that our heart doesn't turn into sucking energy from other people or from ourselves, but really about being about heart and shining through, which brings us over to the ethereal. Now, the ethereal coming off the shadow jester. Now, the shadow jester is using our shadow self, right? And the rigidity of ourself through the bastion to break through the jokes and the wittiness without becoming too cynical, because then we can stay in our bastion self. And the ethereal is going to come along and says, hey, how about this? We're going to illuminate the power of unity, all right? And that's a key word here. And helping our sential self, our sential knight, right? This is the oracle knight. They are different, right? But the sential knight who's standing guard, right? Making sure that we don't go too far into the bastion self and becoming mission driven and focus on inclusive leadership. So here we are, we're using our intellect or intuition, we're using our wisdom to integrate with compassion and move ourselves out of this vampiric heart, or have others that are in that space, into the unity of mind and heart, and moving the shadow jester using our cynicism to interrupt ourselves and interrupt others. And the ethereal comes along and says, hey, here's the deal, guys. This is about all of us together. This, all of us together, is where the ethereal really stands. This is both internal and external. Again, dual path dynamics happening simultaneously. Your objective here is the awareness of these personas, both internally and externally, happening simultaneously and all the time through fluidity. Remember, the mystic persona system is a living system. It moves constantly, as do you, and as does life. Change is constant, and motion or movement is life. Obviously, when we're not moving anymore, there's no more life. You get it. So the ethereal is really talking about inclusively bringing all of these aspects to ourselves, because they all have value when we choose to apply them. That works for ourselves from our intuition, with our heart and mind together, where our heart isn't turning into an energetic, a vacuum suck, and we're not getting so rigid, and we're not dropping into our shadow selves completely with ambiguity or other people doing that around us. And the ethereal really is going to give us that light where we're open, we're aware, we're going to lead with our shadows, but we're going to be lit by our and driven by our conscious our conscious light, our conscious choicing, our conscious competence is the word I'm looking for. As you see this week, we're becoming more and more light as the week comes along, which means we're integrating both, right? Because you're still leading with the shadows, which you can see at the oracle realm. If we drop to the shadow realm, then yeah, we're leading with shadows, and it gets a little bit lighter, but it's light of ambiguity. It's not a focused light that we see over here in the oracle night, and ultimately leading us to the arcane sage. Whew, the arcane sage. Well, there's a lot of analysis going on here this week. So the arcane sage guides really the sorcerer side. Again, sorcerer is going to come out of the Whiz Mage line, out of the shadows, and really blending the insight with openness. And you see the open book there. You see others around the sage. The wheel is turning, all of the integration of knowledge we're bringing from our wisdom, from our insightful leadership, holding some of our the rigidity to ourselves, to our purpose, but using cynicism and wit in a fun way and a blended integration to make sure that the vampires don't come in and suck the life out of it, and we turn into this, or someone else does around us, and we drop into the ambiguity, and we talk in, these platitudes, as opposed to really getting very specific of what we want, because you are the architect of your life. You're the creator. This is choose your own adventure. How you choose to integrate these personas, using them all or using none or using some, completely your choice. And that's where we talk about taking responsibility for our lives. Responsibility is not meant to be obligation. Responsibility is an invitation. It's a choice. It's an integration of how we choose to experience this life. And there is no right or wrong. It's your choice. But they reveal, meaning the arcane sage, the influence really kind of stems from trust and collaboration, and they help the sorcerer align foresight and meaningful connections. So what I'm getting here, see if this resonates with you, comment below. I'd love to hear how it resonates and feels for you, is we're taking our intuition and our intellect and we're integrating them this week, the back half of the week of April the 16th. And we're getting an invitation from Great Architect to say, hey, look, guys, we've got all this analysis. We've got this opportunity to break some patterns. We've seen it, but we've got to be mindful that our heart doesn't drop into vampiric and we're draining ourselves or draining others and becoming rigid, but we're integrating through mind and body, heart and mind, and that we're doing meaningful connections, that we're really connecting. We're not just, oh, it's all about me. I'm the light. this is great. We give these big, ambiguous ideas and visions, but don't really have meaningful steps. These are the things that really help us by blending the two of ourselves, but also our team, our family, our spiritual journey, your physical journey, helping your coaching business, your training business, your entrepreneurial business, your online, your offline, your corporation, because again, this is also your company culture. This is also the company inside you, the diamond of you, as we've talked about many times here on the channel, and definitely do on the member side. It's also your neighborhood. It's your school. It's just people in general online. You start to identify this and it becomes this beautiful adventure of awareness, doesn't it? And that's what makes this so fun, at least for me. I'd love to hear your comments of what's most fun for you, of how we actually are integrating all this. And this week is clearly, I'm getting this is about the integrational week of the inspiration and intuition, intellect of the Whiz Mage. But how we're integrating is really about, are we dropping into the heart of pulling energy in? Are we dropping into the heart of integration? Are we blending both in a very, dualistic path, of course, simultaneously happening, the wolf in you, but also the beautiful sheep in you working together. The wolf in you is protecting and guiding, but not from the too rigidity and not being too ambiguous and pushing people away, including yourself, but also to this meaningful connection. Where am I connecting with people by interrupting the patterns and using my intuition and my intellect blended, my wisdom self, the oracle of wisdom, to make sure that my heart's in the right place for me, meaning yourself, and not dropping into the vampire or vice versa, people around you doing the same thing. Oh, I want to be a part of it. And then they suck the life out of your vision, and that forces you to get very rigid because you're constantly on the defensive. The next thing you know, you start talking in ambiguities and the relationship becomes very distant, or the company becomes distant, or your dream becomes this fantasy what if, and you get lost in sometimes over the overanalyzing and paralysis by analysis, and we lose heart because our heart shifts into draining the energy from so much analytical and not staying in these meaningful connections of our arcane sage, our wisdom self, our openness. You see the open theme here happening all through the oracles, where you see here, each one of the shadows this week is fascinating, are all looking down. You don't see them looking at, you can't see you see a little bit of the vampire, of course, which is part of her, the vampire's allure, both male or female, doesn't matter. It's not a gender specific, right? Bastion, nope, can't see that. Cloak, definitely not. So as we start to see, we're moving inward and away. We're not showing ourselves. We're not showing ourselves to ourselves. We're here, we're open. The light is guiding our way from behind us so we can see into the future. We can be open. We can feel confident about who we are. We can use the cynicism of fun to bring more light, break up the shadow of ourselves, and bring our intellect and our intuition and integrate them together. Remember, this is the era of and happening simultaneously, all of these. This is also about awareness right now as you go through level 1 and level 2. And this is what the back half of the week of April 16th is going to look like. Be aware of these. Be mindful how they are with you. Be mindful around externally and internally. We'd love to hear your comments below of which ones was the most prominent for you this week and what choices that you made using the Mystic Personas system. And again, it really helps if you like, subscribe, and share the channel. You know the drill. Smash that button for us. And if you'd like to become a member, there's every opportunity, no matter which path you choose, at the very, 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 very small level, all the way. And I say small meaning very, very small contribution, because everything helps, but also it opens up other doors for you. The openness of the sage. The book is now on pre-order, by the way. Make sure you visit MysticPersonas.com. The link will be down there for you. And of course, like, subscribe, share, become a member. And if nothing else, remember, you are in the age of awareness. This is your opportunity, your invitation from the self and external to bring all of these 9 personas into integration for this week, where we get to really work and practice through this in a fun, unique way, blending our intuition and sharpening our skills and being crystal clear of who we are and how the parts that we use ourselves in this integration and the people around us. Remember, they're happening both simultaneously as dual path dynamics demands. Powerful week. Look forward to hearing from you, seekers. Have a great and powerful week, and we'll see you next week right here on Mystic Personas.